Hello, hello, Regis Gilbin is the name, and Here's the Storm is the game. And today I'm taking a look at Lunara and presenting to you a high damage Lunara build that I'm very simply calling the Toxic Lunara. She's really all about doing damage over time thanks to her nature's toxin, and some people think that might mean she's a little bit too slow when it comes to killing enemy heroes, and she's really just about long-term sustained damage. And that's true to an extent, but if you build her in a certain way, you can actually make her pretty good at burning people down thanks to the use of her Crippling Spores ability. So this build gives her an edge that you might not otherwise see, and some single target damage and burst damage that makes her really good at not dueling per se, because her health pool is just too low to really duel. But it does make her very good at kind of running around the fringe of a battle and picking off targets or chasing down enemies. We even have a sprint at level 20 at her base movement speed that allows you to secure kills and kind of wreak havoc on the back line by just poking them down and doing a lot of damage and occasionally blowing someone up as needed. So it's not a role that most assassins will typically play. It's kind of more about rhythm and getting in and out and poking from afar and running and coming back and poking some more, and then setting up for a final burst with Crippling Spores, attack buffs, and some speed. But it makes you a pretty chaotic killer of enemy heroes, and when you combine that with Lunara's general utility from things like Wisp, that the vision it provides, she can be a really vital and interesting cog in a very strong team composition. So without further delay, let's go ahead and take a look at the Toxic Lunara build. Starting off, we're going to go with Cruel Spores. This build is actually all about Crippling Spores, mostly for heroes, but Cruel Spores is actually for minions in particular. So it doesn't necessarily suit the goal of killing the enemy, but it still does support our Crippling Spores build. Plus, the other talents in this tier are kind of passive in nature and low impact. Blossom Swell is not passive, but it's still very minimal in how much it can impact a game. But Cruel Spores makes you much better at killing enemy minion waves, because anytime you attack 4 or 5 minions and then pop your W, you're going to dot them for very long periods of time. And you can actually just run off and let the dots kill them. You'll still get the XP, even if you're not in XP range, just because your damage will be what's killing them. But it also means that your W is ready to go for a team fight. So when you're like running on the way to a team fight, using your sprint, you can send an ult through a minion wave and then pop a W. Actually, why don't we just see this in action? I don't think that's going to reset. Yeah, so you can just like basically, oh, I got to get to this team fight. Let me send this in there, and I'm going to pop my W, and I had cooldowns toggled off. But you could have seen that, well, we hit Arthas, so it's not going to work. But if we'd only hit a minion wave, my example here got messed up, but if we'd only hit a minion wave, our cooldown here would have been only 2 seconds, so we could have been ready to use it again for the team fight down here that we're approaching, right? So it allows you some extra XP gain and minion wave utility without really compromising your key ability for team fights, because you don't want this thing to be on cooldown when you need it. So Cruel Spores is actually pretty good. Up next is Dividing Wisp. This is when you send out your Wisp, you can monitor this area, but then you can also send it over here to monitor this area, and it'll stay in both. And then that second half, you can continue to move as needed. This one will stay still. These are all Wisp modification talents. There's no way to get extra damage here. But when you're running around in an outside edge of a fight and looking for heroes who might be straggling away, if there's a fight down here, you can essentially send your Wisp to an escape point of the ally, or the enemy, excuse me, and have an exact idea where they're going and sprint up here and, you know, secure a kill basically on a Jaina or something that's running away. So this also just gives you general vision in a map, which is always nice. Can kind of become a mini Zagara for your team, monitoring choke points and looking for ganks, and even countering ganks a little bit with some sustained damage that helps scare away the enemy. So at level 7, we're going to go with Wild Vigor. This is where we really start to see the damage benefits from Crippling Spores coming into play, but it gets even better later on. This is when you use Crippling Spores, it increases the damage of your next 4 basic attacks by 50%. So we're going to do this. We're going to Crippling Spores. We're hitting for 197 right now. Oh, that was not Crippling Spores. That's Crippling Spores. And now we're hitting for 296 for 4 attacks. So it basically gives you 400 extra damage or so over the course of just a few seconds from using your W, which you're going to be using anyway. So it allows you to burn down one hero in particular a little bit more quickly. If you're looking to do tons of damage to multiple people, then Splintered Spear is where you're going to want to go. But for finishing off a single person, Wild Vigor can give you the extra damage boost that you need to accomplish it. So we're going to get him with a dot there. But it adds up really quickly, unlike the rest of your abilities, which do damage much slower over time. So this gives you, it's not exactly burst, but a little extra to finish somebody off. At level 10, we're going to go with Thornwood Vine. This sends forth vines that deal 360 damage to all enemies in a line, and that also applies your Toxin, of course, making you very toxic. And it has 3 charges, so you can hit 3 in a row real quickly, like that. And you've applied 9 stacks of Toxin. You can see the dot there is taking huge chunks of Arthas' health. It's pretty good. It's great at minions, but it's also good in team fights or when somebody's running away like this. If it was up, we would have hit him and killed him. So it's a great heroic. I like it a lot just because it's easy to apply the Toxin to so many people. And if somebody's running away in a straight line, you can fire 3 of those off and almost certainly secure a kill. If not immediately, then when the dot hits them on the other side of the gate. Leaping Strike is okay, but positionally it can get you in trouble sometimes. And it requires much more commitment than does Thornwood Vine. And you don't want to have to commit too hard with Lunara because her health pool is just too low and she's way too squishy. So overcommitting can really get you in trouble. Level 13, we're going to continue buffing Crippling Spores in a way. This time with Unfair Advantage. This takes Nature's Toxin and increases its damage by 50% anytime it's affecting enemies that are slowed. And Crippling Spores does slow enemies, so this is kind of a sideways buff to your Crippling Spores. Whenever you activate Crippling Spores, you're making your dot do 50% more damage, which is 35 damage per second for 9 seconds. So it's something like 300 extra damage over the course of a full dot duration, which is pretty exciting, really. Because not only when you're slowing people, but when your allies are also slowing the enemy, it does add up. You don't even have to have Crippling Spores, but again, it just allows you to do more damage in those key moments right after you activate your Crippling Spores and you're burning 3 or 4 people. Level 16, we go with Invigorating Spores. Using Crippling Spores increases your attack speed by 50% for 6 seconds. So let's just do this on the target dummy so it's a little more clear to see. So we've applied the dot. We're not attacking very quickly, but then we Crippling Spores, and we're going very fast, and of course we're getting the 296 damage. So that is like a really quick way to do an extra 1200 damage in combo with Wild Vigor. You can increase your range with Starwood Spear, which is good for a poking build, I'll admit. But again, this just gives you the burst to actually secure kills from somebody who's running away or fleeing. And usually giving you just enough damage that your dot will finish the job. And then finally, at level 20, we're going to go with Galloping Gait. Activate to increase the movement speed bonus of Dryad Swiftness to 80% for 6 seconds. So she moves at 20% extra speed by default, which is not as fast as a Mount or even Falstad when he's moving quickly. But this allows her to move at 80%, which is, as you can see, very fast. It sometimes might not look that fast just because her movement's a little awkward, but I promise it is incredibly significant. And it lasts for 6 seconds, which is a very long time. She can just haul it across the map, which makes her very good when trying to secure kills from someone who's running and applying that dot to somebody who just needs, a couple hundred extra damage to die. It makes her even better at escaping when she gets in trouble. So between her vision and Galloping Gait at level 20, it's very hard for Lunara to actually be killed. Because that 30-second cooldown is going to be up most of the time. You don't have to be conservative with using this. You can be pretty greedy in how often you actually cast Dryad Swiftness. So even if you die, it sometimes allows you to get back into the fight a little bit sooner since she doesn't have a mount. In the late game, deaths can be very punishing for her without Galloping Gait, because she's actually very slow to move back. It's kind of like Sergeant Hammer in a way. A little faster than Hammer, of course, but you don't want to be punished too hard. And since this gives you utility in fights and out of fights and an escape, I think it's well worth giving up the little bit of extra damage that Forest Wrath would give you here, or the defense that Abolish Magic provides. So that is my Toxic Lunara build. I want to run through it real quickly for you one more time. Cruel Spores, Dividing Wisp, Wild Vigor, Thornwood Vine, Unfair Advantage, Invigorating Spores, and Galloping Gait. It is still very early in the Lunara lifespan, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to play this build, and really no one has had any time to play any Lunara builds just yet. But so far this one's working for me, and I think it makes sense the most when you just look at the numbers and the playstyle for Lunara. So if you're looking to do a lot of extra damage and play Lunara like a true assassin, because she can sometimes feel a little bit more like a support or utility character, but if you want that damage, this looks like the best build to get it right now. So thanks so much for spending a few minutes looking a little closer at Lunara. This is Regis Kelvin, and until next time, game on.